Days after Donald Trump accepted the Republican nomination, President Joe Biden bows out of the 2024 race.
I revere this office, but I love my country more.
And throws his support behind Vice President Kamala Harris.
And I pledge to you, I will spend the coming weeks continuing to unite our party so that we are ready to win in November.
Democrats are rushing to endorse Harris.
I'm looking forward to 4 more full years when President Harris is in the White House.
I'm very interested in making sure that Kamala Harris becomes the next president of the United States.
And we dive into Harris's legal career, political record, and how Americans feel about her likely head-to-head matchup with Trump. Welcome to PBS News Weekly. I'm Laura Barone-Lopez. Vice President Kamala Harris entered uncharted territory this week after President Joe Biden announced his withdrawal from the presidential race. Greeted by a resounding applause, Vice President Harris arrived at her campaign office in Wilmington, Delaware this afternoon, ahead of her first campaign event as a presidential candidate. It comes 25 days after President Biden's disastrous debate performance that raised questions about his ability to run.
There are very honest and serious and rigorous conversations taking place at every level of our party.
For weeks, the president faced mounting pressure from allies in his own party to end his campaign.
I am running and going to win again.
But he insisted that he was all in, and almost nothing could convince him to drop out.
If the Lord Almighty came out and said, Joe, get out of the race, I'll get out of the race. The Lord Almighty's not coming down.
Then, during a weekend of isolation at his home in Delaware with a COVID diagnosis, President Biden announced his decision. He wrote in a letter posted on the social media site X Sunday, "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, but it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down." Shortly after, he threw his full support behind Harris. Top Democrats like the Obamas, the Clintons, and leaders in Congress praised Biden's decision to drop out. Even former Vice President Mike Pence applauded the move, writing on X today, "President Joe Biden made the right decision for our country, and I thank him for putting the interests of our nation ahead of his own." Harris herself praised the president at the White House this morning.
Every day, our President Joe Biden fights for the American people, and we are deeply, deeply grateful for his service to our nation.
Many Democrats quickly united behind Harris. In its first 24 hours, Harris's campaign racked up $81 million in donations, the highest 24-hour raise, her team said, of any candidate in history. Some who were seen as possible competitors to Harris lined up behind her.
I'm excited to fully endorse Vice President Harris.
Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear gave his backing this morning, but sidestepped questions about whether he'd serve as her running mate.
The only way I would consider something other than this current job is if I believed I could further help my people and to help this country.
North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper delivered a similar message.
Kamala Harris is the person. She's excited to win this thing, and I am too.
Meanwhile, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer gave her endorsement, but said she would not accept the vice presidency if offered it.
If they offer it, you will not take it.
I am not leaving Michigan.
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker also said they support Harris. Though holding back an endorsement, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin confirmed today that he will not challenge the vice president for the nomination.
So you are not interested in running for office, true?
I'm not running. I am not running for office.
On the right, a different story. House Speaker Mike Johnson rebuked Biden's decision to drop out. He wrote in a statement that it invalidated the votes of more than 14 million Americans and joined other Republicans in calling for Biden to resign from the presidency. Former President Trump lambasted the move on Truth Social, falsely saying of the Democrats they stole the race from Biden after he won it in the primaries. These people are the real threat to democracy. And Team Trump is already attacking their new opponent, including Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, at a rally in his hometown today.
If you want to lead this country, you should feel grateful for it. You should feel a sense of gratitude. And I never hear that gratitude come through when I listen to Kamala Harris.
Once Biden was able to come out of COVID isolation and return to the White House, he addressed the nation in a primetime speech from the Oval Office, explaining his decision to drop out of the race.
I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that. And I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. But there's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
Let's take a step back now to delve into Vice President Harris's record and how she arrived at this pivotal moment. William Brangham has a look at her path from the daughter of immigrants to the favorite for the Democratic presidential nomination.
In the blink of an eye, Vice President Kamala Harris went from being President Biden's biggest defender.
One thing we know about our president, Joe Biden, he is a fighter.
To the person most likely to replace him on the presidential ballot 4 months from now. Harris securing the nomination would be historic, the first time a black woman leads a major party ticket. But it would be just the latest in a career of firsts for Harris, a politician who rose from district attorney to state attorney general to U.S. senator. In 2021, she became the first woman and first Black American and South Asian American vice president.
While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities.
Harris is the daughter of immigrants from Oakland, California. Her mother was a scientist who immigrated from India to study at UC Berkeley. Her father was from Jamaica and became a prominent economist at Stanford. In elementary school, Harris was bused from her predominantly black neighborhood to a white one, part of an effort to desegregate local public schools. She lived in California until she was 12, when Harris moved with her mother and sister to Canada. Harris later enrolled at Howard University, a historically black college in Washington, D.C., where she studied political science and economics. She then returned to the Bay Area for law school. And it was in San Francisco where Harris's political career began. In 2003, she was elected the city's district attorney.
To be a prosecutor is to really be engaged in one of the most noblest professions that anyone could do and have.
Her career in law enforcement helped propel her to higher office, but also has earned her a good deal of criticism. California's police unions were livid when she didn't press for the death penalty for a man who killed a police officer. She also championed providing a path for some nonviolent, first-time drug offenders to get education and job training to prevent them from reoffending.
When we're talking about serious and violent crime, lock them up. But when we're talking about nonviolent crime, that is actually the crime that is occupying the bulk of our public resources and beds in our state prison system. And we need to have a meaningful system to reduce the likelihood that that revolving door will continue.
She's California's in 2010, Harris was elected Attorney General of California, overseeing the largest state justice department in the U.S. Harris's office took on predatory for-profit colleges and also secured a nearly $20 billion settlement with banks following the 2008 foreclosure crisis.
It was imperative that we not give a blank check of immunity to the banks for their wrongdoing.
Harris's tenure as Attorney General also coincided with the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and the emergence of criminal justice reform as a major issue. In 2015, Harris didn't take a position on a state law that would have required independent investigations when police killed civilians. Harris's office also tried to prevent nonviolent prisoners from being released after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that California's overcrowded prisons violated inmates' constitutional rights. At the same time, her office launched implicit bias training for law enforcement officers in 2015.
We have developed and implemented a policy on implicit bias and racial profiling.
In 2016, Harris was elected to the U.S. Senate in a landslide, becoming only the second black woman to serve as a U.S. Senator.
I intend to fight for truth and transparency and trust.
As senator, Harris shined in hearings with her pointed prosecutorial questioning of witnesses, including Brett Kavanaugh, after he'd been nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm happy to answer a more specific question, but
Male versus female.
there are medical procedures.
That the government has the power to make a decision about a man's body?
In 2019, with a growing national profile, Harris joined the wide field of Democrats who lined up to challenge President Donald Trump.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States.
But her bid for the White House struggled to gain traction, especially as she faced questions about her record as a prosecutor.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work.
Harris dropped out of the race before a single ballot was cast.
And I will keep fighting every day for what this campaign has been about: justice for the people.
Harris eventually endorsed Joe Biden and was then chosen by him to be his running mate.
In this election, we have a chance to change the course of history. We're all in this fight. You, me, and Joe, together.
In 2020, Biden and Harris won a contentious election.
We did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
And as vice president, Harris's tenure got off to a rocky start. After being tasked with stemming the root causes of migration to the U.S., Harris's first trip abroad as VP was to Mexico and Guatemala.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
With increasing numbers of migrants coming to the U.S.-Mexico border, Harris was criticized for not visiting the region.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
Although Harris later visited the border, it fed into the perception that the Biden administration was not doing enough to curb illegal border crossings. In 2022, Texas's governor, Republican Greg Abbott, bussed migrants literally to her front door in Washington, D.C.
Kamala Harris was saying there's no problem on the border. She said the border was secure. And so I felt the need to be involved in the education process.
In the summer of 2022, the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision overturning the right to abortion marked a turning point for Harris. She emerged as a fierce advocate for the administration on abortion rights and women's rights more broadly.
Do you not trust women to know what is in their own best interest? You, some legislator in some state capital, the majority of whom are not women, are in a better position to tell her what she should do?
And with the Senate evenly split between Democrats and Republicans,
The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative, and the bill, as amended, is passed.
Harris's tie-breaking vote was key in many of the Biden administration's legislative victories, including the sweeping Inflation Reduction Act, which was America's most ambitious effort yet to tackle climate change. Harris also took a leading role in efforts to reduce gun violence, overseeing the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention. She spoke with Jeff Bennett last September.
Absent congressional action, how will that effort make a significant change?
Well, congressional action is very important. There's no question about that. But sadly, a lot of folks there just don't have the courage to do it. The work that we are doing is to make sure that we are implementing all of the executive orders that have already been implemented and passed.
With President Biden now out of the race, the 59-year-old Kamala Harris will again see her career and record closely examined as she tries to both unify the Democratic Party behind her bid and then turn her sights on defeating the former president. For the PBS News Hour, I'm William Brangham.
Harris started laying out her game plan against Donald Trump in her first campaign rally as a presidential candidate on Tuesday. In Milwaukee today, Vice President Kamala Harris hit the ground running.
Good afternoon, Wisconsin!
And got the crowd going. Her first campaign rally of the 2024 race in a key battleground state, wasting no time after being thrust into the limelight as the de facto Democratic nominee.
I will spend the coming weeks continuing to unite our party so that we are ready to win in November.
Harris has secured enough delegate support to win the nomination. A blitz of big-name meetings among state delegations, including her home state of California, brought her over the threshold, barely a day after President Biden dropped out of the race on Sunday. A surge in campaign organizing has broken records. As of this morning, the Harris campaign raised more than $100 million from 1.1 million donors since Sunday afternoon. More than 62% of them were first-time donors, according to the campaign. And 58,000 people signed up to volunteer. That's more than 100 times an average day for the campaign.
We just had the best 24 hours of grassroots fundraising in presidential campaign history.
And Democrats like her chances. In the latest PBS News, NPR, and Marist poll, a statistical tie, with Harris trailing the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, by just 1 point. Meanwhile, President Biden returned to the White House today after isolating in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, with COVID-19. His withdrawal from the race over the weekend followed weeks of immense pressure from inside his own party. Now, among many Democrats, a sense of relief as the endorsements for Harris continue to pile up.
We are here today to throw our support behind Vice President Kamala Harris.
Today, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries joined in backing her nomination.
We're going to hold the Senate. We're going to win the House. We're going to elect Kamala Harris as our next president in November.
Notably, Senator Bernie Sanders, a leading progressive voice, stopped short of a full-out endorsement, calling on Harris to outline more of her policies.
If she is prepared to campaign around an agenda that speaks to the needs of the working class of this country, she's going to win this election and win it big, in my view.
On a press call today, the Republican nominee, Trump, took new aim at Harris's record.
If she becomes president, Kamala Harris will make the invasion exponentially worse. And just like she did with San Francisco, just like she did with the border, our whole country will be permanently destroyed.
Meanwhile, Harris has her eyes on possible running mates to join her on the ticket.
Well, I'm going to keep any of the details of that call personal, but what she did is she called and asked for my support, and I willingly gave it.
Among the potential names, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, both of whom are being considered for the job.
Look, I love being the governor of the state of Illinois, and I've been out on the campaign trail fighting hard for Democrats to win. I'm going to continue to do that, and I'm very interested in making sure that Kamala Harris becomes the next president of the United States.
High-stakes decisions for the Harris team to make in a race completely turned on its head. Harris quickly gained enough Democratic support as the party's potential nominee this week, including from former President Barack Obama.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Oh my goodness. Michelle, Barack, this means so much to me. I am looking forward to doing this with the two of you, Doug and I both. The words you have spoken and the friendship that you have given over all these years mean more than I can express. So thank you both.
But just as quickly as she gained support from Democrats, Harris also gained the ire of her likely opponent.
But this November, the American people are going to tell her, no thanks, Kamala. You've done a terrible job. You've been terrible at everything you've done. You're ultra-liberal, and we don't want you here. We don't want you anywhere. Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. You're fired.
I spoke to PBS News Hour's Amna Nawaz about what's next in the nomination process, how Americans feel about a Trump-Harris matchup, and more.
Laura, you've reported now that Harris has secured enough delegates to secure that nomination for her party. So walk us through what could happen next. Will she be officially the nominee before or during the convention?
So tomorrow, the Democratic National Committee members who sit on the Rules Committee are going to meet, and they are going to vote on a plan for the nominating process. And according to a copy of that plan obtained by PBS News Hour, anyone who challenges Vice President Harris would have to file formal paperwork with the DNC, obtain 300 delegate signatures, no more than 50 from each state, and meet legal qualifications to be president. The bottom line, Amna, is that DNC sources have made clear that they want to have their presidential nominee named by August 7th. And they're going to be establishing an electronic voting process so that way they can hold a virtual roll call vote sometime between August 1st and August 7th. And they want to do this because they're trying to defend against Republican lawsuits that would potentially block their nominee from ballot access.
Meanwhile, you mentioned in your report, we've got new polling out in our PBS NPR Marist polling. What does that show us in terms of how voters are reacting to President Biden's decision to step aside?
So some key findings from our latest poll. There's overwhelming support for Biden's decision to step aside. 87% of national adults said it was the right decision. And then when it comes to enthusiasm, 46% of Democrats said that they are more likely to vote now that Biden was no longer the nominee. And then another key finding, Amna, is that more voters, there are voters that have not made up their mind about Harris. And so there's more that haven't made up their mind about her than those who are already set in what they think about Donald Trump.
You've also been reporting on her search to find a running mate. What do you know so far?
So according to sources close to the campaign, I'm told that Vice President Harris is currently considering 10 candidates for vice president. And the ones that we know so far are North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, as well as Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, the governor there, as well as Cedric Richmond and Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. Now, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan reiterated to reporters today that she has no interest in leaving Michigan, and she said that she hasn't submitted any type of formal documents to be vetted for the vice presidency.
I know from time to time you get a chance to listen in on these focus groups of voters. What have they been saying about Vice President Harris's candidacy now?
I sat in on a focus group that was conducted by Never Trumper Sarah Longwell's firm, and this was a swing voter focus group. So these are people that voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and then voted for Joe Biden in 2020. And some were excited about Harris's potential to win the nomination.
I just feel like it'll be like a breath of fresh air. I feel like it'll be like a new beginning instead of feeling like you're watching a rerun because Trump has already been in office. So I feel like Harris would definitely bring a new kind of like dynamic to her ideas where she wants to take the world, in the next 4 years. So, I mean, I think it's a good decision.
That's Kirby from Georgia, and a number of the voters in the focus group said that they were excited about the idea of her going head-to-head with Donald Trump. There was one voter, Sumath from Georgia, said that he wasn't necessarily happy with Kamala Harris as an option and that he is likely to reluctantly go back to Donald Trump.
4 years she's been in the White House. She's been the vice president. And did she do anything? No. I have no idea what she even did. So I feel like Americans are not being given a good choice here. Like, we're just being given the breadcrumbs out of both choices.
Sumath from Georgia was the only one in that group, Amna, of 8 swing voters who said that he felt as though he had to go back to Donald Trump after Kamala Harris's launching her presidential campaign. The other 7 voters said that they would ultimately vote for Kamala Harris. And if I could just add one more thing about the nomination process, Amna, it's that when they ultimately vote on this electronic process tomorrow night, the DNC, it means that they are likely to have a nominee ahead of their physical convention in Chicago, which is slated for August 19th through 22nd. So we are likely to see a nominee named in a very quick time frame here. That's it for this week's episode of PBS News Weekly. For all of us, thanks so much for watching.